Thank you. Good evening. Tonight's Committee of Adjustment hearing is being held by video conference and live stream video on the town's live stream webpage at oakville.ca. This is a hearing to consider applications for variance, minor variance and consents held under the authority of the Planning Act. Please keep in mind the intent of this process is to review the application that is before the committee, listen to the evidence, and then make a decision. This process is not intended to be used to resolve any concerns or disputes that may exist between the town, individuals, or organization. If a request for a deferral is made, the committee grants such a request. The applicant or authorized agent must contact the Secretary-Treasurer to schedule a new hearing date. In order to conduct an effective and efficient electronic hearing, we have adopted the following process. If you are watching the live stream of this hearing on oakville.ca and if you wish to speak to an item on the agenda, you can call 905-815-6095. Again, the number is 905-815-6095. The phone number will also be posted on the live stream page at oakville.ca. Staff will be standing by to take your call. When you do call in, staff will ask for your name, item number that you wish to address, and your telephone number, and further instructions will be provided to call back to join the video conference. When the chair of the committee polls for interested parties, please press *6 to unmute yourself. The applicant or agent will then be given the opportunity to briefly explain to the committee of the basis of their application and answer any questions that may arise. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided for each presentation. You'll need to state your full name and address for the record. Any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the committee. All delegations must state their full name and address for the record, and 5 minutes will be provided for each presentation. All remarks and questions are to be directed to the chair. Any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the committee. The applicant or agent will then be provided with a further 5 minutes to respond to the comments made by any interested parties, answer any questions that may arise from committee members, and if the applicant or agent has any concerns found in the staff report, particularly with the proposed conditions, this will be the opportunity to advise us. The matter will then be taken into committee for a decision, and this will mark the end of all discussion. Any person desiring the decision and notice of the decision for an application must provide a written request, preferably through email, to the Secretary-Treasurer. Written notices of the committee's decision will be mailed no later than 10 days for minor variance and 15 days for consent applications to the applicant, agent, and any other person filing a written request of such notice. The last date to appeal the decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal will be noted on the decision. Only the applicant, specified persons, or public bodies may appeal the committee's decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal. In November of 2022, Bill 23 legislation, the More Homes Built Faster Act, amended the Planning Act to remove appeal rights for members of the public. If no appeal is received within the prescribed time frame, the decision of the committee becomes final and binding, and the Secretary-Treasurer will then notify the applicant and anyone who has received a copy of the decision through written correspondence. People participating in this hearing are to be courteous to and respectful of the members of the committee, town staff, and any other person participating in the electronic hearing. Tonight's electronic hearing is being video recorded and available for viewing at oakville.ca. Thank you. We have no regrets this evening. Do I have any declarations of pecuniary interests? Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be declaring a conflict with respect to CAVA 121 of 2024 at 2515 Royal Windsor Drive. My employer is the approval authority for access for Winston Churchill Boulevard, so I'll be declaring a conflict.
Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Noted. We have no consent applications. Do we? Sorry. Do we have any requests for deferrals or withdrawals of applications, Madam Secretary Treasurer? If there's anyone in the audience who would like to request a deferral of application, please put your hand up and the Secretary Treasurer will invite you to speak.
Madam Chair, I just moved in one of the applicants.
Hi, good evening. My name is Paul Bansal. I'd like to request a deferral for application CVA 141-2024.
At 1178 Wood Place, correct?
Yes.
Okay. We're assuming this is because of the unfavorable staff
report.
You'd like to work on it?
Yeah, we'd like to address some of the comments and come back to the committee when we've kind of worked towards the comments we received.
Okay, very well. Mr. Bansal, I urge you to reach out to the neighbors, Mr. and Mrs. Trigono. I'm sure you've seen their letter of objection.
Yes, we will. No problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, all those in support of a deferral? Okay, the application has been deferred. You'll see the Secretary Treasurer at your earliest convenience.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good evening. Anyone else, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
No, Madam Chair, I don't see any hands up.
Okay, very well. Application CAB 147 of 2024 at 246 Douglas Avenue. Again, that's application CAB 147 2024 at 246 Douglas Avenue. I have Allison Strickland here as the agent. Good evening.
Thank you. Good evening, committee members. Thank you for this opportunity. Before doing anything, if I could ask that this slide be moved to number 2, which will bring up the site plan. Thank you. What we're applying for on this property is an increase to the maximum lot coverage of 29%. This is comprised of an extension to the rear of this 2-story house. It's a single-story extension out the back. And it also includes the removal of the existing 1.5-story freestanding garage and the construction of a newer, smaller freestanding garage towards the rear of the property. So 29% is common in the neighborhood, but it does sound like a big jump from 19%. So the first thing that I wanted to point out is that the current coverage on the property is already 25%. So this is not as big of a jump as it may look on paper. So just looking at the site plan, the area on the main house, shaded in dark gray, to the back represents about an extension of 11 feet. I'm still looking at the site plan here. About an 11-foot extension beyond the current rear of the house. It does involve some removal of some existing first-story space and just replanning that first-story space with some existing second-story remaining above it. But the new addition extends into the backyard by 11 feet. This still is well short of the required rear yard setback and leaves a very generous amount of the rear yard still intact. And so the house is definitely not dominating the property too severely. As far as the existing garage is concerned, it's getting reduced substantially and becoming much less dominant by moving towards the very rear of the property. So if we could move to slide number 4. That just shows the front of the house as you see it from the street with no proposed changes at all. And if you go to slide number 5, please. This shows the side view on the north side. What you see in gray is no proposed change, and what you see in the right on the right-hand side in white, that is the extent of the new addition. And that new roof line where it meets the existing house at its highest point is 16 feet. That's 4.89. So much lower than the existing roof line. Slide number 6, please. Shows the rear of the house. What you see in white is the new addition. So very much in keeping, the same language as the existing house, same materials, designed to be integrated as holistically as possible. Could I have slide number 7, please? Shows it from the south side, the new addition on the left, very modest. That's the fireplace bump out on the wall, no windows. That's all. Could I have slide number 8, please? Slide number 8 is of interest for the freestanding garage because it just gives you an idea of what existed before in terms of height and scale compared to what's being proposed new. So it's quite obvious, with that side view of the mansard roof that it's reducing in scale quite substantially. And what you see from the front is much smaller as well. We don't need any other variances for this. This property or this proposal complies with the side yard setbacks. There's no variance in height required. The floor area is still within the limitations, and coverage is the only thing that we're requesting in this particular case. I don't know if you have this. Do you have a slide 9 there on your? Yeah, okay. Slide 9 with the green dots shows the extent of the canvassing that the homeowner was able to do, and they obtained 13 actual letters of support, not just verbal but written support in all of these properties. So the neighborhood is firmly behind the proposal and has offered not just support but favorable comments and well wishes to our current homeowner. We believe that this proposal meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act and is minor in nature, and open for questions from the committee.
Thank you, Ms. Strickland. Any questions or items of clarification of the applicant at this time? Okay, I see none. Has anyone called with interest for this application, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
No, Madam Chair, there have been no calls and no hands up. Madam Chair, there have been no calls and no one with their hand up.
Thank you. Okay, let's take it into committee. Who would like to move a motion? Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having undertaken my site visit, having reviewed the materials, including the written staff report, as well as the applicant's submitted drawings, and having heard the presentation from Ms. Strickland, I am satisfied that the requested variance conforms to the 4 tests of the Act. I'll put forward a motion of approval. The proposal is quite modest in terms of its replacement and reconstruction of a 1-story addition and the reduced massing to the proposed detached garage. So the motion would be subject to 2 conditions, those being that the dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the submitted site plan dated September 24th. September 4th, 2024, and elevation drawings, and that the approval expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued.
Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? Yeah, I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved. Thank you.
Thank you very
None
much.
opposed.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Okay, application CAV 148 of 2024 at 1315 Cleaver Drive. Again, that's CAV 148 2024 at 1315 Cleaver Drive. I've got Stephen Brousseau as the agent. Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Okay, yeah, perfect. That slide's good there. My name is Stephen, and I'm from Stephen Brousseau Design, and I'm here as the applicant and acting as the agent for my client at 1315 Cleaver Drive. We're seeking relief from an interior side yard setback on the west side here. We're looking to match the existing side yard setback of the house that is currently at 2.51, even though the bylaw is 4.2. So essentially my client's looking for an enclosed outdoor kitchen, serving both the sunroom and the backyard. The location is pretty important. We really can't put it towards the backyard or on the other side of the house. It's kind of inconvenient there. And so, yeah, what we want to do is design it as a single story addition, tie it to the sunroom. And that way, you know, we design it with a flat roof and it minimizes the impact of the addition to the neighbors. We would design it as an accessory building, but same comment as before, we'd have to detach it from the house. You have to put it in a different location, and you can't have an accessory structure in your side yard. And so, yeah, to reiterate, we're just looking to match the addition side yard setback with the already existing side yard setback of the house at 2.51 meters. We believe that this meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act and is minor in nature. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions or items of clarification of the applicant? Yeah, I see none. Has anyone called with interest for this application, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
No, Madam Chair, there have been no calls and no hands up.
Okay, very well. We'll take the matter into committee then. Who would like to move a motion? Go ahead, Mr. Dickey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Based upon my review of the owner's application, the site plans, and the building elevations, my site visit, and the presentation by the owner's consultant, and the planning staff's report, I am satisfied that the variance is minor in nature and conforms to the 4 tests under the Planning Act, and I put forth a motion that the application as applied for be approved, subject to the conditions that the dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the submitted site plan dated September 5th, 2024, and that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction.
Very well, thank you, Mr. Dick. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Have a good evening.
Good evening. The phone number to call with interest for to speak to any application is 905-815-6095. Again, that's 905-815-6095. Staff will be standing by to take your call and provide you with further instructions to join the video conference. Next item on our agenda is CAV 105 of 2024, deferred from July the 24th. Again, that's CAV 105 of 2024, deferred from July the 24th at 1187 Pine Grove Road. We have Mr. Van Kulen here. Go ahead.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Curtis Van Kulen, agent and applicant for 1187 Pine Grove Road. We're before you tonight to seek relief from one item of the zoning bylaw. We're looking for a relief to the maximum residential floor area. We're asking for about a 2.75% increase to that. We were before you in the past, and we came back to work with town staff. We made a bunch of changes to the elevations, specifically targeted to reduce the massing of the structure and then hide some of the two-story wall surfaces. So staff had done a really good job in the staff comment report that is also shown online, summarizing the revisions that were done. And the largest one I want to just draw attention to is on the rear elevation, which I think is on about page 4 of the document that staff has presented. Maybe the next page. The rear, there it is. So the largest change in the massing we made was pulling down the roof over the great room. You can see it there on the left-hand side of that elevation, just above the walkout stairs that are underground. That was a large change that we made that would really maintain some sympathy to the surrounding houses in the neighborhood. So overall, like I said, we've come back and worked with town staff, and we feel that the increase in the RFA at 2.75% is minor in nature. We feel that this development meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Michael. Are there any questions or items of clarification? Okay, I see none. Has anyone called with interest for this application, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
Madam Chair, there have been no calls and there are no hands up.
I'm not sure. You are cutting up.
Sorry, Madam Chair. There have been no calls and no hands up.
Okay, thank you. Very well. Who would like to move a motion? Mr. Tarlowski, go ahead.
Madam Chair, we're always happy to move approval of an application that comes back to us with a more sensitive and compatible design. Based on the revised application, I don't find there to be any impact caused by the variance. I find that it meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act, and make that approval subject to the dwelling being built in general accordance with the site plan and elevation dated September 12th, 2024, and that the approval expires if the building permit has an issue within 2 years. I'd also note there is no objection from the community.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Tarlowski. Is there discussion on this recommendation? Okay, I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed.
Thank you much. Have a good evening.
Have a good evening. Okay, Ms. Secretary Treasurer, I'll wait for Mr. Hardcastle to be out of the meeting before calling the last item on our agenda. Very well. So the last item on our agenda is deferred from August the 21st of 2024. It's CAV 121 of 2024 at 2515 Royal Windsor Drive. Again, it's CAV 121 of 2024, deferred from August the 21st of 2024 at 2515 Royal Windsor Drive. And Mr. Guzzi, you are here as the agent, correct?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay, good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Joe Guzzi. I'm a planner at Dillon Consulting, and I represent the applicant. The variances being requested will facilitate the development of a 6-story commercial self-storage warehouse facility at the northwest corner of Royal Windsor Drive and Winston Churchill Boulevard. I just want to say that we've been working collaboratively with town staff through the site plan process, and the proposal before you is a plan and a design that is acceptable to the town. I do want to take this opportunity to thank the town for their input in the site plan process. We have reviewed the town's staff report and agree with its recommendations and conditions. I'd be pleased to answer any questions that the committee may have. If the committee wishes that I proceed with the details of all the variances, I can do so. But we have provided submissions to the committee on how the application meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act. So I seek your direction if you want me to continue with the presentation.
Mr. Guzzi, if you can just go through them in a short form for the benefit of the public.
Sure. All right. Well, then I'll proceed with the presentation you have on the screen. Next slide. Right. So this slide just shows the location of the subject site. It's within an industrial area. There's industrial uses to the north, which is mostly automotive, and industrial uses to the west. As you can see, directly to the west is the vast parking area. What's important to note about this site is that it also has a daylight triangle, which has an impact on the variances that are being requested. Next slide. This just shows that the property is vacant. Next slide. And the property is also subject to 2 zoning categories, the E3 and the E4. And the reason why I bring this up is because one of the variances deals with height, and the E3 portion of the property does not have any height restrictions, whereas the E4 does, and the bylaw always defaults to the most restrictive on the property, and that affects one of our height variances. Next slide. This is the proposal is a 6-story building. It's well articulated architecturally. We've received a lot of input from urban design, and we've incorporated them, and it embraces the corner quite appropriately, because this is a very important corner at those 2 intersections. Next slide. This is our site plan. It basically has 2 points of access from Royal Windsor Drive. Both you can enter and exit, and you exit from Winston Churchill Boulevard or onto that street. There is 11 parking spaces provided. Most of them are indoors, and all loading activities are indoors. Very little impact on the street. It's a very low impact type of use. Next slide. So these are the variances that are being requested. Generally, the variances really come down to the side yards, both the flankage yard as well as the interior side yard. Those are lower than the required in the bylaw. Many of that is related to the fact that there was a quite onerous road dedication on Winston Churchill that is required and has compromised the site as proposed. And some of these, they're all interrelated because as you reduce the side yard, then you're also reducing the amount of landscaping. And it's also further complicated by the fact that it's a daylight triangle, which also puts an impact on the way the bylaw side yard regulations are interpreted. Next slide, I'll go into them in a little bit more detail. So the first variances 1, 2, and 3 deal with the reduced side yard along the flanked yard. As you can see, based on the articulation of the building, that there's some parts of the building that are extend a little bit further into the side yard. But what this does show is that adequate landscaping is still provided, which can mitigate the building from the pedestrian experience. As you can see, many layers of landscaping is provided with both large trees, smaller trees, and shrubs. Some of the variances are also affected by that daylight triangle. As you can see, highlighted in red, the 0.44 reduction is a result of the way the building envelope meets the corner. So it's really only at certain points where that requirement is not met. And also with regards to the parking area, there is a requirement for that parking space to be able to back out. But then still there's adequate landscaping that is provided. And this has been vetted with city planning, and they're in agreement with what we're providing. Next slide. This is the side yard. The interior side yard is a reduction where 1 meter is provided. We've been working with city planning and engineering to make sure that this works. From a drainage perspective, all drainage is contained on site. We've provided a French draining system to ensure that happens. And engineering is satisfied that it functions properly and it can be maintained within that side yard setback. Also to note that this side of the building has no windows, so there's no impact of overlook or other building code separation regulations. And also on this side, the adjacent property owner has provided a letter of support. And also, you will note from the earlier slide that this area is a vast parking area. So there's very little industrial activity that occurs adjacent to this building. Next slide. So this is our last variance. It's with height. As I mentioned earlier, there is no height limit to the northern part of the property. And we're asking for a 25-meter height limit. There is very little impact on adjacent properties. We believe that the intent of the zoning bylaw is maintained with these variances. They're minor in nature. They have very little impact on adjacent properties. And we've been working with staff to create something that's appropriate and desirable for the development of this application of this property. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. But we respectfully request that these variances be approved.
Thank you, Mr. Guzzi. Are there any questions or items of clarification of the applicant at this time? Mr. Dickey, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tell you the truth, I'm a little concerned with the fact that you only got a 1 meter setback, interior side yard setback for a 6-story building. Your 1 meter is 1/3 of the normal required setback. So just give me a little explanation why you think you're justified and how you're going to convince me that that's acceptable.
Sure. Thank you for that question. As I mentioned, we have worked with planning staff and engineering. We The biggest concern that was raised by engineering was that whether the property can drain properly. And engineering is satisfied that the solution that we provided, which is installing what we call a French drain. Basically, it's a drain that allows the drainage, the water to go into this drain and drain further down, is an acceptable method to deal with that issue. The 1 meter was deemed appropriate for not only its function, but its ability to be maintained in the future. Do you have any other questions regarding that? I mean, that's all the information I have regarding that.
Well, I do have a question. You mentioned maintenance. So you've got a 6-story building, let's say in 5 or 10 years, something's gonna be problems in there. How are you gonna maintain it? You only got 3 feet to get in there. Maintain and repair, whatever.
Right. Well, there's very little, it's a pretty maintenance-free building. It is made of masonry. There's no windows or openings on that part of the property. It was not raised as an issue by city planning. And we believe that it can be maintained within that period, within that that distance.
What I'm concerned about, you're going for a height, you're increasing the height from probably four stories to 6 stories. Okay, maybe I can live with that. But no, the side yard setback, you shouldn't be decreasing that side yard setback. I'd be concerned about the flankage yard also, but somebody's justification is that you didn't know that there was going to be a road widening needed, so that somehow justifies why you should be allowed to have a reduced side yard. Like, you're building a building that's much bigger than what the zoning bylaw allow. You're cutting back. Let's say we were less concerned about the landscaping because that can grow in. But on both sides of the building, you're putting it closer to the neighbor and closer to the road. And you got a building that's substantially higher than what's normally allowed. There's my point. Whatever you want to say, great, but I'm concerned about that. Thank you.
Right.
Any further questions or items of clarification? Mr. Talowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Guzzi, just picking up on Mr. Dickey's point, how are you building this with the 1 meter side yard? Are you requiring access from the neighboring property, or are you building it solely from within your client's property?
There might, so the adjacent owner is the same owner as this property. So arrangements will be made. There should not be any issues with the building of the property or, building of the building on the property or maintaining it.
Mr. Dickey.
I'm sure I heard this right, but just to clarify, you're saying the owner of the subject property is the same owner as the adjacent property?
That is correct.
So when the adjacent owner says he has no objection, of course he doesn't have any objection, he owns it. So that aspect of him sending a letter of support from the owner and supposedly a second letter of support from the tenant of that same property has less relevance to me now that I find out that's the owner of the subject property. Am I thinking somewhere is wrong here? I just want to, again, give them the opportunity to change my mind.
Well, the operators of the adjacent property have indicated in their letter that because the drainage condition is improved, that they are satisfied and pleased about that. Also, their operations are within the building. It's separated by a vast parking lot, and as a result, it does not affect their industrial operations.
You didn't answer my question, but thank you. That's enough.
Anything further? Okay, Mr. Tolowski, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to ask a question that Mr. Guzzi probably can't answer. But given that both properties are owned by the same owner, would the owner be willing to provide a maintenance easement on the adjacent property for future maintenance on this building?
If that is a condition of approval, then I'm sure that's something that can be negotiated, but I would have to refer to my client on that. I mean, that is a way of ensuring that maintenance can occur. I would like to be able to explore that option, and perhaps a deferral might be to our benefit to be able to explore that option.
I have a question of planning staff. You seem to be okay with this variance and you're in support of it. And I understand what Mr. Guzzi said in terms of planning engineering, and they seem to have no problem with it. But notwithstanding that, you didn't have any concerns to start with. What if the property adjacent to this gets sold later on in the future? Those are all legitimate questions.
Mm-hmm. Yes, through the chair, just to clarify, there were some instances around the city and in other municipalities and other jurisdictions where there is a small setback to buildings, and somehow they are able to maintain and correct any or maintain, repair those buildings. I'm not sure the how to go about doing that, but I've seen other buildings with such setbacks, particularly in the downtown areas.
Okay, thank you. In terms of a discussion, although this is late in the game, but since you are the last matter on our agenda, I will give you that leeway. I'm okay with the possibility of a deferral should you want to discuss further with your client the negotiation of an easement, as Mr. Tolowski had recommended or suggested. I don't know how Mr. Dickey feels about that. He's nodding, so he's okay with that. So would you like to take a deferral and come back?
I would actually. I think that the maintenance issue that was raised by Mr. Dickey is something that we should explore. So I would like to request a deferral.
Very well. All those in support of a deferral? Okay, we'll defer your application and you'll see the Secretary Treasurer at your earliest convenience.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, that was the last matter on our agenda. We need to confirm minutes, but I'll wait for Mr. Hardcastle to come back to the meeting. Okay, Mr. Hardcastle, you're back with us. We need to confirm the minutes for October the 22nd. Who would like to confirm them? Mr. Hardcastle, thank you. And we can adjourn. Motion to adjourn. Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle, at 7:44.